The Pentagon has quietly shifted one of its most formidable weapon systems into the Middle East, marking what analysts describe as the most consequential U.S. military confrontation with Iran since 1988. According to information available in February 2026, the USS Georgia, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine capable of carrying up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, has been stationed in the region since September 2025. Its deployment comes alongside a full U.S. Navy carrier strike group operating across both the Red Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, while infrastructure for stealth bomber operations at Diego Garcia is being prepared for possible use. Current U.S. force posture shows roughly 30,000 American personnel spread across the central command area of responsibility, but commanders emphasize that the composition of deployed assets matters more than the raw number. The USS Harry S. Truman, CVN-75, is the only aircraft carrier presently in the region, having transited the Suez Canal on December 15th and operating since then with carrier Air Wing 1. The Air Wing fields 4 Super Hornet strike fighter squadrons and the EA-18G Growler Electronic Warfare Squadron, VQ-137, essential for suppressing and jamming enemy radar networks in the event of conflict. Escorting the Truman are ships from Destroyer Squadron 28, including the cruiser USS Gettysburg and the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers Stout, Jason Dunham, and the Sullivans. The formation is currently dispersed between the Red Sea and Eastern Mediterranean to support Operation Prosperity Guardian, aimed at countering Houthi activity. Yet the asset viewed as most decisive in any potential strike on Iran remains the USS Georgia patrolling beneath the surface. Beyond naval deployments, the United States is positioning itself to conduct long-range operations if ordered. Diego Garcia, situated in the central Indian Ocean beyond the reach of Iran's conventional ballistic missiles, features facilities built for B-2 stealth bombers and maintains extensive stocks of fuel and munitions. The location would allow Washington to launch bomber sorties without relying on Gulf states, several of which, including Qatar, have publicly stated they will not allow offensive operations from their territory. These U.S. deployments take place against the backdrop of a major degradation in Iran's air defense network. Israeli operations in 2024, most notably Operation Days of Reckoning, destroyed nearly all of Iran's Russian-supplied S-300 PMU-2 air defense batteries, systems originally delivered in 2016 to protect high-value sites including nuclear facilities. Israeli F-35I Adir aircraft penetrated Iranian airspace during these strikes, and reports indicate that a combination of cyber and electronic attacks disabled Iranian radar screens. Analysts now assess that all 4 S-300 batteries are inoperable, leaving Iran reliant on a limited number of indigenous systems whose effectiveness against stealth aircraft remains unproven. The timing of these developments is significant, because Iran's nuclear program has accelerated sharply. According to the IAEA's February 2026 quarterly report, Iran's stockpile of uranium enriched to 60% has risen to 274.8 kilograms, a 50% increase in 3 months. By switching its IR-6 centrifuges to use 20% enriched feedstock in late 2024, Iran increased production of 60% material nearly 7-fold. Western intelligence agencies now assess that Iran could produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a single nuclear device in less than a week, although actual weaponization would take months longer. In the wider region, the United States maintains a network of bases supporting its posture: Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Naval Support Activity Bahrain for the 5th Fleet, Camp Arifjan in Kuwait handling logistics, and smaller deployments across Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. Diplomatic efforts continue in parallel with military preparations, but Washington and its allies view Iran's combination of weakened defenses and rapid nuclear advancement as bringing the situation to a critical point. The U.S. strike architecture under consideration involves cyber operations, cruise missile saturation, standoff strikes using advanced munitions, and potentially deep penetration attacks employing the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, delivered by B-2 stealth bombers. As of this week, the strategic landscape is shifting quickly. Iran's breakout timeline has collapsed, its defensive systems are degraded, and U.S. military assets across the region are aligned for rapid action if ordered. Observers warn that the coming weeks will determine whether the diplomatic track prevails or whether the region moves closer to a military confrontation that could reshape Middle Eastern security for a generation. For ongoing coverage and detailed analysis, viewers are encouraged to subscribe for further updates. At the core of the unfolding situation are the operational plans and intelligence assessments shaping U.S. and Israeli decision-making as Iran's nuclear program advances. Military planners emphasize that any strike order would follow a layered sequence designed to suppress Iranian radar coverage, dismantle surface-to-air defenses, and prepare access routes for manned aircraft. Phase 1 would rely on cyber and electronic operations, similar to the Stuxnet campaign of 2009 to 2010, which destroyed roughly 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz and delayed Iran's enrichment efforts by up to 2 years. Officials note that a renewed cyber offensive would be intended to disrupt command networks and blind early warning systems before physical strikes commence. Phase 2 centers on a cruise missile saturation attack. Tomahawk Block 5 missiles, with a range of approximately 1,600 kilometers and guided by GPS terrain matching technology and a two-way satellite data link, would target above-ground support infrastructure, air defense batteries, and communications nodes. The U.S. Navy maintains an estimated inventory of around 4,000 Tomahawks, and the USS Georgia alone carries up to 154, making it one of the most concentrated cruise missile platforms ever deployed in the region. Military officials have previously emphasized that disclosing a submarine's movement, as Secretary Austin did when ordering the Georgia to the region in August 2025, is unusual and intended as a strategic signal. Phase 3 would involve the JASSM-ER, designated AGM-158B, a stealthy, air-launched standoff missile with a range exceeding 925 kilometers. With fewer than 2,000 in U.S. inventories, it remains a limited but critical asset, capable of neutralizing radar sites and command centers from outside Iran's air defense envelope. Its employment would help create corridors for manned aircraft, a requirement for the subsequent phases of the strike plan. Phase 4 introduces the EA-18G Growlers of VQ-137, which would conduct standoff jamming of surviving radar systems using the ALQ-218 receiver suite and the next-generation jammer. These operations would be coordinated with F-35 aircraft tasked with destroying remaining high-value air defense targets using advanced anti-radiation missiles. With radar suppression underway, planners envision the opening of access points for the final stage, deep penetration bomber operations. Phase 5 is referred to by defense officials as the decisive component. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, operating from Diego Garcia if deployed, would carry the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound precision weapon specifically designed for hardened underground facilities. The MOP contains more than 5,000 pounds of explosive material inside a steel alloy casing and can penetrate approximately 60 meters of earth or 18 meters of reinforced concrete before detonation. Each B-2 can carry 2 such weapons internally. The bomb exists primarily to target Fordo, Iran's most heavily protected enrichment site. Fordo's depth, estimated at 80 to 90 meters beneath rock, presents the most difficult operational challenge. Defense calculations indicate that a single MOP cannot reach that depth. The solution demonstrated during Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025 involved multiple sequential strikes on the same aim point. 7 B-2s delivered 12 MOPs on Fordo and 2 on Natanz during that operation, with each subsequent weapon penetrating deeper into the crater created by the previous one. The USS Georgia launched more than 30 Tomahawks at the Isfahan Nuclear Research Facility in the same strike. Post-operation assessments by the IAEA confirmed the destruction of nearly all sensitive equipment at Fordo. This military planning proceeds in parallel with diplomatic activity. On February 4th, President Trump signed National Security Presidential Memorandum 2, directing maximum pressure on Iran and ordering that the country be denied all paths to a nuclear weapon. While signing the directive, the president stated that he preferred a verifiable nuclear agreement, but acknowledged strong pressure from advisors to increase coercive measures. That same day, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with U.S. officials and presented 4 strike options ranging from an exclusively Israeli operation to a U.S.-led attack. Behind the scenes, intelligence sharing and joint planning continued, even as Washington and Jerusalem publicly signaled supposed policy differences. Sources familiar with those exchanges reported that both governments intentionally leaked stories portraying disagreements over Iran, part of what was described as a coordinated effort to reduce Iranian vigilance during the diplomatic phase. Secretary of State Marco Rubio maintained a hard public line, insisting that Iran halt all uranium enrichment, restrict missile development, and end support for regional proxy groups. Formal negotiations, mediated by Oman's foreign minister, began in April with 4 rounds of indirect talks in Muscat and Rome. Despite this, tensions escalated as Iran denounced what it described as contradictory U.S. behavior, new sanctions, continued strikes against Houthi targets, and intensified military signaling. By June, the 60-day diplomatic window had expired without progress, confirming that U.S. military preparations were not theoretical exercises, but operational planning aimed at real contingencies. Broader intelligence assessments warn that any strike on Iran's nuclear facilities carries long-term strategic risks. Analysts at U.S. institutions recall the precedent of Israel's 1981 strike on Iraq's Osirak reactor, which archival evidence later showed prompted Saddam Hussein to accelerate a covert nuclear weapons program. Several experts, including those at the Modern War Institute and Harvard University, have warned that while military action may degrade Iran's physical capabilities, it could strengthen factions within Tehran that see nuclear weapons as essential for deterrence. Within the current environment, Iran's nuclear timeline has collapsed to days, its air defense network has been severely degraded, and its regional proxies have been weakened by recent conflicts. Israeli operations last year resulted in the death of senior Hezbollah figures, including Hassan Nasrallah, and the Assad regime's collapse in December disrupted a major supply corridor linking Tehran to regional partners. Meanwhile, the USS Georgia remains in position with its full load of Tomahawks, and Diego Garcia is being readied for bomber deployment. These developments underscore a strategic landscape in which diplomatic efforts continue, but military preparations advance simultaneously. The coming period will test whether negotiations can slow or reverse Iran's nuclear trajectory, or whether the region will move toward a confrontation with significant long-term consequences. Further updates will continue to track statements, movements, and indicators shaping the trajectory of this standoff. Additional intelligence, regional developments, and historical analyses now shape the strategic environment as the United States weighs potential military action against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Experts note that Iran's facilities are dispersed across multiple locations, many built underground, and supported by thousands of trained nuclear scientists. Even if key enrichment sites were destroyed, technical knowledge would remain intact, raising questions about the long-term implications of any military strike. Analysts at the U.S. Institute of Peace and other research institutions warn that while force can degrade equipment, it may reinforce Tehran's belief that only a nuclear deterrent can prevent future attacks. Historical precedent plays a significant role in official assessments. The 1981 Israeli strike on Iraq's Osirak reactor initially appeared to halt Baghdad's nuclear ambitions, but documents uncovered after the 1991 Gulf War revealed that the attack prompted Saddam Hussein to expand a covert nuclear weapons program. Scholars at the Modern War Institute concluded that the strike had the unintended effect of accelerating Iraq's efforts rather than ending them. Officials cite this example as a cautionary reminder that attacking nuclear facilities can alter threat perceptions inside the targeted state in ways that may increase long-term instability. Regional dynamics further complicate the situation. Iran's proxy networks have suffered substantial setbacks over the past year. Hezbollah lost an estimated 4,000 operatives during Israeli military operations, including its longtime leader Hassan Nasrallah, and Hamas remains militarily weakened. The collapse of the Assad regime in December disrupted a key supply corridor linking Iran to Lebanon and the eastern Mediterranean. These developments reduce Iran's ability to project power indirectly, but also raise concerns among analysts that Tehran may increasingly rely on asymmetric or retaliatory strategies if threatened directly. Diplomatic efforts continue but face shrinking timelines. Oman remains the primary intermediary, and its foreign minister has overseen several rounds of indirect discussions between Tehran and Washington. However, U.S. officials note that if the Omani channel falls silent, it would signal that diplomacy has stalled. Pressure is growing as international monitors attempt to track Iran's nuclear progress. The International Atomic Energy Agency has repeatedly warned that it no longer has continuity of knowledge regarding Iran's centrifuge inventories, heavy water stockpiles, or uranium ore production. This loss of visibility, caused by restricted access and the expulsion of experienced inspectors in 2024, has led the agency to conclude that its ability to verify Iran's program cannot be fully restored. At the same time, the IAEA's next quarterly report is viewed as a key indicator. If Iran's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium continues to grow at its current rate, U.S. and allied officials say the political pressure for action will intensify. Iran's total enriched uranium reserves now exceed 8,294 kilograms, more than 40 times the limit permitted under the JCPOA. With approximately 16,900 centrifuges operating and advanced IR-6 cascades using 20% enriched feedstock, analysts estimate that Iran's breakout time, the period needed to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a single device, has collapsed to nearly zero. U.S. Strategic Command and the Defense Intelligence Agency both assess that Iran could produce roughly 25 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium in less than a week under current conditions. Further complicating matters is the absence of direct communication between Washington and Tehran. Unlike the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, when the United States and Soviet Union established a crisis hotline, there is no formal channel for nuclear-era deconfliction between the two governments. Regional powers with competing interests, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China, add additional layers of uncertainty. Analysts warn that the lack of a shared deterrence framework increases the risk of miscalculations as military forces reposition across the Middle East. U.S. officials identify 3 indicators that will determine whether the confrontation moves toward diplomacy or military action. The first is Diego Garcia. Satellite imagery showing the arrival of B-2 bombers at the atoll's dedicated hangars would signal that operational timelines are transitioning from planning to active preparation. The second is the IAEA's upcoming nuclear report, which will detail the pace of Iran's 60% enrichment. The third is the status of the Omani mediation channel. A breakdown in indirect talks would suggest that both sides have concluded negotiations are no longer viable. As of this week in February 2026, Iran's nuclear breakout time has collapsed, its air defenses have been severely degraded, and regional proxy networks have been weakened by recent conflicts. The USS Georgia remains stationed in the Middle East with 154 Tomahawk missiles. Diego Garcia is being readied for bomber operations, and U.S. production of the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator continues to expand. President Trump's maximum pressure directives remain in force, and Israeli leadership has presented detailed strike scenarios to U.S. officials. The situation is evolving quickly and carries implications that extend far beyond any immediate military exchange. Observers note that decisions taken in the coming weeks will shape the Middle East's security architecture for years to come. Coverage will continue as events develop,